without a new mandate. The straitjacket of the 2024 manifesto is just, came from a good place because Keir Starmer wanted to get Labour back into office. Fair enough. But it is no longer fit for purpose.
I think Kemi Badenoch has, I read somewhere, this is the most right-wing Tory party since Thatcher. And I think that's true, and that's certainly, there is probably an urgency in the way Badenoch is thinking about how am I presenting the Conservative Party at the next general election. It can't afford to be too broad spectrum. It needs to appeal to quite a right-wing cohort.
Tice comes across as what he is, which is a man with a Christmas tree 6 feet up his arse, right?
Yeah.
Who is incredibly pleased with himself, lives in Dubai, or I don't know where he lives.
Yeah.
And I don't think he gets away with idiotic remarks like that.
Hello and happy Sunday, everybody.
Happy Sunday, one and all.
Hope you're all having a great weekend so far. This is the Two Mats Q&A session brought to you by the subscribers of the New World magazine. First question comes in from Jane McShane, who describes herself as a long-time listener and subscriber. Thank you, Jane. And first-time caller. Welcome.
Welcome, Jane.
I couldn't disagree more with the Kelly plan. Yes, Reform are in a worse position than they have been recently, but as the result in Clacton shows, there are plenty who are still willing to stick with them. The main reasons, though, revolve around Labour. They have not had a good couple of years in government. There have been plenty of mistakes. The good things they've done, they haven't managed to communicate. For a large part of the electorate, they are no more effective than the Tories were before them. Burnham needs to show, not tell, that he can improve things for people, and he should take the full remainder of the Parliament to do this. Well,
having named the Kelly plan after you outlined it,
thank you.
I feel honour bound, and having sworn a constitutional oath to protect it, I feel honour bound to defend it.
Thank you for your loyalty.
Always, El Presidente. So, of course, look, this issue is going to keep. I mean, it is actually, I suspect, going to become the issue, and Labour conference. I bet you it'll be, one of the main themes. And of course, the argument Jane makes is a cogent one, and it's one hears a lot of. I still support the Kelly. I mean, in seriousness, I do support the Kelly plan, and I'll tell you why. Reform is on the floor. Farage is in real trouble. The Clacton by-election made him look like an idiot, and there's probably going to be another one which will also make him look like an idiot. Even if he wins, he is now looking smaller and smaller and smaller. But he might not be forever. Farage is. I made a big mistake years back in underestimating him, and I'll never make that mistake again. He is resilient. He's the only one of them really who has that. It is a one-person show, Reform, in that respect, which is a massive weakness. But he does have it, and he's still there. I feel nervous in relying on the gradient of the decline just carrying on.
Yeah.
Second thing is, yes, it's important that Burnham show, not tell, but it will get harder for him. The public will start to resent him just because incumbents in the modern world gather resentment like ivy, and also because I think he intends to do things, at least I hope he does, which will be challenging and wouldn't necessarily involve controversy. And related to that, and this is, I think, the kind of settler for me, is that I can't see how he does any of the things he needs to do. And we talked on the Wednesday pod about social care and the climate measures that need to be taken urgently without a new mandate. The straitjacket of the 2024 manifesto is just, came from a good place because Keir Starmer wanted to get Labour back into office. Fair enough. But it is no longer fit for purpose. And unfortunately, and we've talked about this before, manifestos are still binding. Maybe they shouldn't be, but they are. And so I think he needs a new mandate. And therefore, I don't have a timeline in mind. There's no sort of terminus in my head, but sooner rather than later is my strong predisposition, because he's got energy, he's got the attention of people, he's got Reform on the floor. Things might not get better necessarily for him.
Listen, I think that argument is totally sound, and I still believe that if he goes sooner than later, then
he'll win.
he'll win. And so as we've said in previous podcasts, it's not as simple as that. There will be, he'll win, but he certainly won't have the majority he's got
Oh,
right
no,
now.
no, no.
So then he's got to present an argument to his parliamentary Labour Party to say, I'm sorry, folks, but I know for a fact that 40, 50, 60, 70 of you are going to lose your seats and
Yeah,
your jobs at the next election. So that's unpalatable. I was told last week by somebody who is pretty much in the room at number 10 that it's been because Andy Burnham answered, I think, Laura Koonsberg and said that there is no plan
there
or
is no
something like
plan.
that.
Yeah,
And
it was very carefully worded.
it
Yeah,
was all very present tense. I was told that he's been much more categorical about that
interesting.
in the room,
In the room.
and that they're not even talk. It's not a topic for conversation. They're not
So it's
working.
not it's not like Gordon Brown in
It's not
207.
there. Well, there is definitely no hive of activity
Right.
around. Do we do this? Do we not do this? Do
Yeah,
we?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But notwithstanding that, I think you're only ever in modern day politics. You're only ever a couple of events away from utter seismic change in thinking,
Yes.
and I still wouldn't rule it out completely. I think positive polling combined with one or two reform missteps, which are all, reliable as buses, right? Then
Yeah.
he may decide, do you know what? Let's go for it. The mood is with me. Because above all, he is an instinct politician. And
Yeah, yeah.
at some
Very
point,
true.
his instinct is going to say, gosh, do you know, I think it is on. I think the game is on, and he might go for it, but he might not. He might not. And Jane, thank you again for
Yeah, thanks
writing
for
in.
that.
You might be absolutely right, and you're certainly right to disagree with it. I mean, most people do disagree with it, to be fair. Although I have been encouraged that I'm not a complete buffoon in seeing the same idea touted in the FT amongst
Yeah,
others.
you've arrived when the FT without attribution, Financial Times people. How dare you not mention Lord Kelly of
Could
Islington? How
you
dare you?
could you imagine if it actually got called the Kelly? Well, that'd be great. I think people should
It is
start
called.
referring
Do you mean if it is called? It is called the Kelly Plan. What are you talking about, boss? Come on.
the Kelly. Do
The
you remember the
Kelly
Kelly? Do you
Plan.
remember the Kelly election of
The Kelly
2027?
election of 2027.
Total disaster for
Disaster
Labour.
for Labour. They were out for 25 years after that.
Right, all right, enough of that. Next
Right.
question.
Next question. From Libby in Edinburgh. I see that Kevin Badenoch is keeping Tory grandees like Penny Mordaunt waiting over their chance. It is funny. Their chances of being. Why it's so funny? It is of being parliamentary candidates. I admit that it does make me chuckle, but I also wonder if the party can really afford to drive away the handful of experienced centrist figures it still has. Bloody small handful. Is Kemi conducting a purge or making a fresh start? What do you think, man?
Well, I have to say, there are things about Kemi Badenoch that I really like, right?
Yeah,
But none of them involve policy
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or politics. But I do quite like her attitude, which is, she is gutsy, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
she's totally unafraid, and she's sharp. She's definitely got better at the sort of the articulation of politics in our age. There's no question about that. And I loved that she just knocked Grant Shapps off and said, "You're."
Well, that was
that,
that wasn't just chuckle. That was a
I mean,
full belly
honestly,
laugh moment.
that was just the hubris, hubris and nemesis, as
That
somebody
was worth 3 Tory seats, I'd have
once
thought.
for, But Penny Mordaunt, well, it's more than just ruling out somebody who is clearly not a net asset, because Penny Mordaunt, I mean, she was. Listen, find me something that anyone can remember about Penny Mordaunt apart from holding that sword up. Then
Well, she was. I mean, I'll tell you something that might appeal to
go
listeners.
on.
She was a very strong supporter of trans rights.
She was. She came out very strongly about trans men are men, trans
Yeah.
women are women. She was unequivocal about that, which was very interesting. But I mean, I think she had 7 or 8 ministerial posts, and I mean, to be fair to anybody in that situation, how can anybody create a legacy when you're being shuffled around from post to post in that? And I had a couple of interactions with her one to one, and she always struck me as, you know, perfectly nice. I liked her backstory. I liked the fact that she represented a place like Portsmouth,
Yeah,
um, and she was nice, but she was never anybody that you thought, my God, I'm in the presence of electricity here. She was fair. I found her fairly humdrum. But to the points of the question, I think Kemi Badenoch has. I read somewhere, this is the most right-wing Tory party since Thatcher, and I think that's true, and that's
yeah,
certainly there is probably an urgency in the way Badenoch is thinking about how am I presenting the Conservative Party at the next general election. It can't afford to be too broad spectrum. It needs to appeal to quite a right-wing cohort if it's got a cat in hell's chance against reform. So I suspect it is a bit of a purge, if,
yeah.
if a gentle one.
I think the problem is, I mean, the Tory party has been in purge mode since Boris Johnson took the whip away from the 21
Yeah.
um, in September 2019. And it is not fed that, I mean, he won the 2019 election, but that that kind of carving out of those people who represented the one nation tradition. Well, some could say that they brought it upon themselves by being so sort of flabby in their role in the party. But I don't think the Conservative Party stands a prayer of getting back into power without some offer to the centre as well
Yeah.
as to its reform flank. Now, okay, to the question, I'm not sure, and this picks up on what you just said, Matt. I'm not sure. I mean, I think Kemi Badenoch, I quite like her personally, and I think she's interesting and she's grown in confidence and all the rest of it. But she's not a fresh start leader. She's not. I mean, there's absolutely nothing new in what she's saying. There's no fresh offer of what a centre-right party might be and would do distinctive from Burnham's Labour or Farage's Reform.
Mm.
That we saw what happened to Starmer when he tried to be Reform light, and none of it was good, right? So although I understand she has to be robustly conservative on things like immigration, just getting rid of all the remaining centrists, and we're talking about, by the way, literally you could count them on your one hand. So
Yeah.
in a sense, it's a non-discussion. I have a slightly higher opinion of Morden than you do. I know her fairly well, and I think she does think about this, and I think she's, I also think that it's not like it's not like Badenoch has a surplus of talent, is it? I mean,
Yeah.
how many front benchers can you name? Don't worry, I'll wait.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
maybe Merle Stride, maybe James
No, it's true.
Cavalier.
When they line up at PMQs, quite
Who
often
the
I've
fuck
got
are
I've
they?
got no idea who they are. Yeah.
And she's got 118 MPs, right? I
Yeah.
mean, she is facing an extinction level event for all of the, it's quite fashionable at the moment to say the Badenoch essence, that she's kind of, well, she's a little bit higher in the polls, but she's still, she's still looking down the barrel of a reform. I mean, it's quite possible that the reform could just wipe them out at
Yeah.
the next election and still lose to Labour. So I think she's not in a luxury position. I mean,
Mm.
I'm not saying Penny Mordaunt hasn't. By the way, Penny Mordaunt has no entitlement to a plum seat, if there is such a thing, than anyone else. But I think Badenoch just has to exercise a bit of care
Mm.
in being very pleased and getting. She's not in a strong position.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway,
Listen, the Tory party much, much better than I
I
do.
don't know.
So,
No. I mean, this is the thing that the Tory party now has
yeah.
zero to do with the Tory party I used to write about.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it, in itself, how
I
much
mean,
it's changed.
it's. I don't know what it is. I mean, I know what reform is, and I hate it,
Yeah.
and I know what Burnham's Labour is, and I'm cautiously optimistic we'll see.
Do you think
What
that's
is
Matt? Do you think that's more true? Is that only true of the Tories then, or has Labour also changed out of all recognition in that period?
I felt during the Starmer era that it was in real danger,
Right.
because it was becoming so technocratic.
Yeah.
But God knows, early days. But I am, he's only just past where are we now? Just past the 1 month
Yeah.
mark. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think Burnham does represent a change, and we may see something very different around Christmas time. Who knows? But I kind of feel now I know I know what Labour is. I know, I can vote for it with not just kind of out of I just want to stop reform, but there are things they would do that I like.
Yeah,
And I know I say this again and again, and I will keep saying it until election day and beyond. Mission number one is keep reform out of office, right? I don't
100%. Yeah.
really see how the Tories fit into that,
Interesting.
or
Interesting.
anything, to be honest.
Yeah.
What are they for? What's the point of them?
Yeah. Well, that's got to be question number one, isn't it? Right.
Absolutely.
Next question comes from Mark in Surrey. Do the Mats think that Richard Tice's outrageous remark that Brits should enjoy the heat wave will assist reform's welcome decline?
Oh God, I hope so. I mean, look, listen, I'm actually a massive fan of Richard Tice, not in the way that might sound. I
Explain
re
yourself.
I really want him to be on every channel all the
Yes.
time, right? Because every time he says anything, right? Every time he reads out the phone book, right?
Yeah.
People go, "Ugh, do I really want to vote reform?" He
Yeah.
is really yucky, right?
He's their weak link, isn't he?
He is terrible. I mean, Generic is just a sort of terrible opportunist, and we all know where we are with him, and
Yeah.
whatever. But Tice is like actively a sort of pantomime idiot villain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm all for it. Great when he says stuff like that. And the interesting thing about it is that I think Farage could have got away with that in certain circumstances because he has this twinkle. Oh, I don't really mean it. Aren't I a bit of a geezer, a bit of a lad, right? Tice comes across as what he is, which is a man with a Christmas tree 6 feet up his arse, right?
Yeah.
Who is incredibly pleased with himself, lives in Dubai, or I don't know where the fuck he lives now.
Yeah.
And I don't think he gets away with idiotic remarks like that. So while Farage is busy spending more time with his by-elections, I'm really, really hoping that Tice will be on every bulletin and in every podcast and just saying stupid stuff because it's the Lord's
Yeah.
work. It really is.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think he is, and I think the thing is that I'm pretty sure, and that Farage knows that Tice is the weak link.
So much, yeah.
You can tell it's like, oh, for Christ's sake.
Christ, he's up again.
It is interesting, the little triumvirate of Farage, Tice, and Zia Yusuf.
Aren't they fun?
I mean, two of them I think, are liabilities, and I suspect that Farage kind of does despair a little bit when he thinks about, because obviously when you're a leader, you need people around you, don't you?
God,
Good
yes.
people, a good team. And I don't get the sense that Farage believes he's got a good team around him, which is what causes these wobbles from time to time.
And
it's like,
you can tell that by how often they deploy Leila Cunningham, right?
right,
Who
exactly.
who
Yeah,
is actually only, but she's their mayoral candidate for London. Well,
yeah,
it's an important role, but she's actually used as if she was sort of number 3 or 4 in the party, which she isn't. And
yeah,
she's often caught out because, she's
yeah.
she's very sort of, she's articulate, but she's not fantastically well briefed.
No, that's
So
right.
her problem is often that, good interviewers will just say something and she doesn't know the answer.
That's right.
And
That's
I think
right.
the fact that Farage uses her so often
Yeah.
is interesting.
What happened to Sarah poaching?
Well, you see, that's a really good question. And I think that again speaks to the point you made, which is that I think he had very high hopes of her in this respect. And then she started saying stuff about, do you remember sort of putting asylum seekers under canvas and stuff like
Right.
that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Farage, for all of his horrificness, does have a line, not made from morality, but made from political instinct.
Yeah.
Is why
Which he's developed.
right, exactly.
Yeah. That's right.
This is why he left UKIP, because they had employed Tommy Robinson. Not
Yeah.
because I think he's sort of more virtuous than Tommy Robinson, but because he thought that, it brings in lots of people who support Tommy Robinson, but it also contaminates my brand as a prospective prime minister big time. I'm not
Yeah.
going to have that. And I think Sarah Pochen started to say stuff that so this is why reform is so beatable.
Because isn't she the shadow Home Secretary?
I think
I think.
Yusuf is the Shadow Home Secretary. She's
Is
got
he?
some role. Yeah.
Is it? Good
The
Christ.
Home Affairs spokesperson. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Same idea. All
He
right.
comes out occasionally to say that we're not doing enough for Christian heritage.
That's
That's
right.
his,
Very, very strange guy.
yeah,
Honestly.
very strange.
Somewhat. Yeah. I'd love to get him on the psychiatrist's couch and try and work him out. Anyway.
He's probably already there.
Yes, as we
Just have to,
speak.
hello, Sia, are you in there?
Right, should we move on?
Yes. So, from Pete. Increasingly, I find myself using AI in my day-to-day life and also in my work. I'm a technical engineer, and the latest models of AI can achieve results in an instant that would have taken many days of effort. Yet it strikes me that much of the press coverage I read around AI has a negative tone. Shouldn't we focus more on the upsides of AI rather than obsess on the challenging aspects? Who knows? Maybe it will lead to that world of abundance you chaps keep speculating about. What do you reckon, Matt?
Well, well, I think you can do both. But I do agree. I do agree that there probably is a preponderance of negativity around AI right now in the press, and I've got a theory on why that might be, and it's because I think publishing is particularly vulnerable
Yeah, yeah.
to the things that AI can be particularly good at, although probably some of that uh, some of that ability is illusory. But I mean, there are astonishing stories
Yeah.
about bookshops in Wales, you know, being rare and obscure books shops that specialize in that being sent vast orders from
Yes, yeah,
Chat
yeah.
GPT and to their credit, I think the bookshop has said we want nothing to do with it.
But the ones they get, they pulp.
But
They copy them and pulp.
they destroy the books.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's got a sort of taboo about it. But they destroy the books and they absorb
Hmm.
all of the knowledge within the books. And somebody explained to me it's because there is an incessant demand within the language learning model for new content. You know, it needs to be fed if it's going to
Well,
keep growing.
you know, on X that Elon Musk introduced this new ability to do long form, which is why Will Self has been able to do his,
Yeah,
very engaging
yeah,
columns on this, right? Well, the reason for that is
right.
that Musk worked out that uh, his AI system and others were running out of stuff to
Yeah,
read,
yeah,
and that long form that he owned
yeah.
that would be a good way of encouraging it. It
Well,
wasn't because he wanted to.
Will Self will definitely expand AI's
He
vocabulary.
certainly will.
No question about that.
Imagine
But
Chat
that,
GPT. I don't know what you
yeah.
mean, Matt.
But that is such a great example, isn't it, about why something apparently,
Benign,
irrelevant,
irrelevant.
inconsequential,
Yeah,
actually can have a material effect on
yeah,
how
yeah.
AI develops. So I think to answer Pete's question, I think publishing is very worried about AI, disproportionately so, and that's why maybe in the media you do get this overall negative tone. But you're also right. I do think there are things within AI that could generate enormous positive benefits to society. I mean, not at a basic and obvious level, curing things
Yeah.
that are beyond the wit of just researchers, but also productivity, which is our great challenge in the UK. We've got a very poor productivity rate. If we could harness AI productively and increase the productivity of the economy could quite feasibly grow quite quickly. And I think, this is this the thing that's always mystified me is if AI comes in and takes over and makes things more productive and takes away more mundane jobs and people are laid off and you get then this universal basic income, which is
Yeah.
one theory about how we'll all be paid in the future. We won't have to work so much, but the government will basically pay us all the currency we need to get day by day and to enjoy our lives. Where does that money actually come from? That's
Yes.
what I can't get my head
Well,
around.
where it comes from is that basically you abolish labor, but you retain capital, right? And you get you people who own capital and own things disperse as and when they please and
Yeah,
trade money that, as you point out, doesn't really mean anything. But that's
yeah,
that's that's the worry with UBI. I mean, I think the point of the question is really good, which is we sort of oscillate between utopianism and doomsterism on AI, and that's silly. And certainly, you hear all the time, anecdotally, that it's helping with workflows, and that's great. And as you say, Matt, the health tech. stuff has already been amazing. I mean, there was DeepMind's AlphaFold breakthrough, which is, absolutely game changer. There's been massive changes on breast cancer screening, so that's just unarguably fantastic. I mean, my own sort of hang up is that I do think that we are slowly delegating huge chunks of our cognitive function out
Yes.
without care or thought. And we need to explain to people, we need AI literacy, I suppose, which is we need to explain to people of all generations that LLMs, first of all, are not reliable and they're not real people. And that the art of critical thinking and being an active citizen, which God knows we need, depends upon mental fitness like physical fitness. And you are basically saying, I never go to the mind gym if you delegate everything to AI. And I think that is an issue. The other reason I think that one has to be not alarmist, but vigilant is that the big lesson of the social media era was do the hard thinking and the regulation at the start. Because at the beginning, everyone was super utopian. I remember people at Google and Facebook, and then as Twitter was Twitter, saying, hey, it's going to be great. This is going to, end tyrannies, and everyone will speak to one another, and nations will speak in harmony, and imagine all the people and everything. And it didn't really work out that way. And now we're worried. There's a case being this week in California over the impact it's having upon young people's mental health, and we know all the cases of suicide and so on. So I think the message with AI is don't stop it, don't stop the dynamism, don't stop it in its tracks. You can't anyway, right? But there is a reason societies and governments exist, and that's to negotiate. Businesses need the rule of law to operate, right? They pretend nowadays that they don't. Tech tycoons act as if they don't need government, right? They exist on a high. It's bollocks, right? They need the rule of law that governments. Therefore, there is a democratic power there, which is why, by the way, all the Trump MAGA tech tycoons are so scared of Europe, because it's offering a regulatory structure that they hate. And I think that we should be on the front foot about that, which is, yes, we're in favor of AI. Yep, we want lots of innovation, but human beings come first, and I think that's fine. That's not doomsterish. It's just how you adapt to a new and radically new technology.
Yeah, agree with all of that. All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a very quick break
yeah.
and then come back with some more of your wonderful questions, dear listeners. Welcome back, dear listeners. This is the Two Mats Q&A brought to you by the subscribers of the New World magazine. And the next question comes from Sue. And Sue says, watching, on Matt Dancona's recommendation, the early life of Anthony Bourdain in the film Tony, I find myself enjoying his story thoroughly, only for it to be tempered by knowledge of how his life was ended. And of course, we have the dreadful tragedy of Jason Arday in recent days. I investigated the statistics and was shocked to discover that around 20 people a day take their own lives in the UK. Men account for 3/4 of all those deaths, and it's the biggest killer of men under 50 in the UK. Sorry to ask such a depressing question, but why is this not being treated as a national emergency?
Well, thank you, Sue, and I'm glad you liked the movie, because I think it's an absolute gem. And Dominic Sessa playing the young, still called Tony Bourdain, and since the title of the film is, I think, if he doesn't get an Oscar nomination, it will be a crime. He's just brilliant, and lots of other people are great in it, like Leo Woodall and Antonio Banderas. Anyway. But it's true that permeating the film, and deliberately so, and with some quite one particular moment where the sort of shiver of recognition goes through of what lies ahead, is that the fact that Bourdain's life ended tragically young. 2018, I think he was only 61, and you're sort of aware that there's this sense of this golden person emerging as a chef who has a kind of passion, but it's going to end badly. So that does lead to the point that Sue makes, and it is a great one. And I think the problem with this issue is that it often gets conflated and tangled up with the whole sort of poison and idiocy of the manosphere, as if it was somehow all the fault of feminists and women that men are taking their own lives, right? And that's ridiculous and silly and gets us nowhere, and sort of terminates a really important argument. So for me anyway, the best source of ideas on this issue that I've found is there's an organization called the American Institute for Boys and Men, which sounds like something out of MAGA, right? But absolutely is the opposite, which is it was founded by a guy called Richard Reeves, very liberal man he used to be Nick Clegg's chief advisor and in government. And Richard went to America and founded this institute, and it does really, really good work on this issue, but not from the sort of, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate side of the house at all. It's all about policy, what's really going wrong. And, he's found a lot of things, which is that, a lot of working class men in particular, disproportionately, have borne the brunt of recent economic and social dislocation in the last 20 years, not stagnant and sluggish wage growth, being made redundant and not really having much of a prospect of being employed ever again. And also the decline in family stability. In America, I was really astonished by this. Only 1 in 2 working class men aged 30 to 50 now lives with children. That's a big, big change in what it means to be a man. So the feeling that they are surplus in the workplace and in their families is really what underpins this. And it's hard to generalize, but that's the sort of pattern that Richard has found. And but to his credit, he talks about specific and quite targeted strategies, which is, okay, we're dealing with the real world. How do you help men specifically with the problem when they lose their jobs, or specifically when they get divorced and they're trying to find a new way to build a relationship with their kids?
Yeah.
Let's not, stop saying it's all the fault of third wave feminism, because that's a ridiculous way of approaching the problem. The question is, how do you actually help people? And I think it's one of those web pages I go to oddly enough to cheer myself up, because he's one of the few people. I think James Bloodworth, whom we had on the podcast, is very good on this. I think Richard is superb.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That's a really good answer. I mean, there is a definite connection to deprivation and geography,
Yeah.
that the government can take tangible action on, and obviously there are those things. And by the way, we should say, there are places, if people are struggling, there are places to go and talk confidentially to people. There's Samaritans, and there's also NHS Help for Suicidal Thoughts page, which there are places where you can go for confidential
you're
support.
not alone.
24/7, so
You're not
you're
alone.
absolutely not alone, and people do feel despair like this. But so you can treat and you can hope. I know there's a government strategy. I think it was led by our friend Stephen Kinnock under Starmer before
That's
Stephen
right, it
went
was.
to, who was care minister. To try, and the goal is to try and reduce by 10%, the suicide rate. But you're still talking about thousands and thousands of people. I think, let me get the numbers up here. 7,000 in 2024, 7,147 registered deaths from suicide across the UK, which is, that is 20 a day. It is staggering. That's and it's worse in the northeast and the northwest. It's lowest in London. I think it's highest in Scotland. So anyway, when you start digging into the data, you can start to see, here are clues as to where the problems might be.
Politics of place.
The politics of place, exactly that. And it's about ultimately, as we've said, in the terrible case of Jason Arday, there are these are not easily understood events, but you can go to work on the known factors that you can affect, and I think I think the point of the question is a really good one. Is that it's such a big killer, and yet it's still sort of, if it was a disease, which you might argue it is in some ways, but if it was a disease like a cancer or something like this, then you'd probably be able to point to huge research facilities and huge charities and grants and stuff like this to a greater degree than those that do exist around suicide. But it isn't. And, I think what I'm trying to say is that making the whole picture, making the underlying causes better, improving
Yes.
poverty and relationships, and taking the stress out of people that is unavoidable when you're in economic decline. That will be a longer term solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you have to address the problems as they are. So it seems to me that, violence against women and girls, male violence against women and girls is a national emergency. Mandy
Yeah,
Reid, the former leader of the Women's Equality Party, used to call it, a form of domestic terrorism. And I thought that was not an exaggeration, right? That
yeah,
needs to be, there. And the male suicide issue needs to be there on the other side. And these objectives are not in conflict. They're not.
not at
So
all.
it's not a zero sum game. This it's about developing a real sense of a functional, reasonably contented society.
Good. Okay, good stuff. One
Right.
more
So
question.
one more question, and it's a belter. From Mick in Essex, Weatherspoons have banned people taking calls on their mobiles on speaker mode. Should this be extended nationwide? Or better still, should the government legislate to force Apple, Samsung, and the rest to remove this infernal capability entirely? What do you reckon,
Yes, 100%.
Matt?
Honestly, I never thought I'd have cause to give praise to Tim Martin,
Yeah,
who is
exactly.
the Brexit loving boss of Weatherspoons. But this is absolutely right. It is a bloody menace.
It
People
is.
walking round. I mean, it's bad enough people talk loudly anyway on their phones, but when you can hear the bloody response on the speaker, and the way people hold their phones, and I've got to say, someone near and dear to me does this all the time. My wife, and holds the phone about half a meter away from her mouth, and talks at it, and the voices blare back on these tinny little speakers. And it's absolutely noxious behaviour. And when you get two or three people doing it on a train, I want to get off. It's
Yeah.
awful. And I think I can't for the life of me understand why you can't just put the bloody phone next to your ear. I remember, when phones came out, everybody said, "Oh, it gives you brain cancer," or it boils your inner cortex. And I remember on the Daily Mirror, somebody, I think one of the photo editors got two of these Nokia phones, and with elastic bands, put them either side of a fresh egg, in the expectation that if they left them on all day, this egg would get boiled. And of
Oh, that's
course,
brilliant.
and of course, at the end of the day, they cracked the egg open. It was
And
stone
it was
cold and
still,
absolutely
yeah,
fresh. So, but yeah,
yeah.
no,
Oh,
I think it's utterly antisocial behaviour to inflict
yeah.
these phone conversations on the rest of us. So if you do this, and obviously
Stop it now.
I would stop it now. Stop it now.
Well, I'm a crawler, so I propose to carve out an exemption for Mrs. Presidente, right? Because that's how I roll, Daddy-O.
I was rather hoping you'd be the one to tell her, because I certainly haven't got the courage. But
You,
anyway,
you must be kidding. You're mad. Look, I don't know about removing the capability altogether, because I've sort of seen it used nicely when families are talking to elderly relatives and whatnot. But I think the broader point is 100% on target, especially in public places. And on trains and buses, this is where I find myself reluctantly being dragged into the grumpy old man category. That was always going to be my natural silo, because people shouting into their phones or playing music, and the question that always crosses my mind is, do we can hear you, right?
yes, yes.
Is it that you just don't care, probably, or is it that you exist in such a strange little digital enclave of your own manifestation that it doesn't occur to you that the rest of us, we can hear, sound does travel. So
Or even
that
worse, you think we're interested.
oh yeah, which is of course the craziest, which is, I must know what Deronda
Yeah.
did on Saturday night. Tell me. No detail too small. Um, and this is where, but I also think it's a sort of the antisocial point you make is really interesting, because, as you know, one of my big hang-ups is people talking at the movies, right?
Yes. Oh,
Which is
totally. Yeah.
which is now standard, and I think obviously, there's part of me that wants to say, it wasn't like that in my day type of thing, and the younger generation, etc. But I think it's deeper than that, which is I think that the idea that there are certain spaces, like on the train or on the bus, you kind of, if you're talking, that's fine, or if you're listening to something, you use some headphones, that's how you do it. And if you're at the cinema, you shut the fuck up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Those, I thought that was kind of all agreed,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
I think that the gap, because the public-private thing has been sort of so melted,
yeah,
it actually doesn't occur to people that when they go to the movies, talking all the way through is
yeah,
weird. It's not only
yeah.
incredibly annoying, it's actually very strange.
Listen, mate, you've just reminded me of something which I think might give us a clue to what's going on in that it is a cultural
Yeah.
phenomenon because Nadia and me, my wife and I, we went to China in about the year 2000,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was an amazing trip. And we went to Hong Kong, and then we took the train to Beijing, which was like 32 hours on one train.
Wow.
It was fantastic,
I bet it
and
was.
we ended up in Shanghai and went to the Shanghai Opera House, which I, I, I might be talking nonsense here, but I got the impression it was a fairly new building at that time. It hadn't just opened, but it was
I
new, and
think you're right. Yeah, I
it
think
was
you are right.
very, very impressive building, and they were putting on really great opera, right? And we sat down and the opera begins, and then after about 10 minutes, a phone goes, right, a mobile phone. And I
Wow.
swivel round, like a Karen, and sort of glared at this person, expecting to see somebody mortified, grabbing for their phone to turn it off. But the person picked up the phone from their pocket, answered it, and started having a conversation.
Amazing.
And what was really amazing was that nobody else apart from me was thought anything of
Yeah.
it. They were just the phone had gone. They were having a chat, and they just happened to be in the middle of an opera in Shanghai Opera House.
Yeah.
And I do think there is an element to that where if you explain to people or said to somebody, can you turn off a younger person, can you turn your phone off speaker? They'd think you were mad. They would like, what
Yeah.
on earth is your problem? So maybe it is generational.
I think it is partly, but I think it's just like different perspectives. So you've met my younger son, and we were
Yeah.
at the movies about a month ago. And as you know, he takes his movies very seriously. It's what he's studying. And there were a couple of guys next to us who were just talking all the way through the film.
Oh God.
And my boy, who's he's a very amiable fellow,
Yeah.
but this rubs him wrong, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And so he turns to this guy and said, "Stop talking now."
Yeah.
And the guy, what was so fascinating was, first of all, I thought this is going to end up with me being beaten up, right? Because that's the normal,
Yeah.
right? That's the normal procedure
Yeah.
in these, right? But also, what was much more interesting was the guy was genuinely startled
Yeah.
that
To have been
someone
admonished. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
his age cohort. I think if I'd done
Right.
it,
Right. Right.
I'd
Yeah.
just have got shivved there and then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that my son said, "What are you doing? You're
Yeah.
at the movies." He was
Yeah.
like, "Well, what are you talking about?"
It's incredible. It's
But it's really
incredible the way
interesting.
that this is why I'm reluctant to go sometimes to the cinema because
Yeah, I hear you.
honestly, it's got worse and worse. And what of all the bloody things to serve people in a cinema? Who thought of popcorn for Christ's sake?
It is a
Literally
very important point.
the noisiest thing anyone can eat in a
I think we should do a piece because I'm sure there's a reason for this because all the things in the history of the cinema
yeah,
have a
an
commercial
origin
reason,
story.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
won't be an accident that popcorn was chosen.
yeah,
It'll have been high yield, low
yeah,
cost, and it goes back a long way.
yeah. Well, we must find out.
Who is responsible for this social atrocity, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'll
Popcorn.
tell
Who
you
will
what.
act?
We'll find out, dear listeners. We'll come back next Sunday. We'll have found out why is it that popcorn is a thing at cinemas.
Yes.
Interesting.
And why do people pay 25 quid to go to the Everyman Cinema on a
Yeah,
date, right? Each ticket, very
yeah.
nice plush things. And then sit down, and the minute it starts, someone says, "Is he going to die?" Right? And you know, and you just think, why? What are you doing?
Oh God.
Anyway,
Right.
end of rant.
Okay. Right,
It's a
dear listeners.
Sunday.
It's a Sunday. Go to the cinema and take some popcorn with you and ruin everybody's film. That's what you can do
Yeah.
today. Send in your questions for next Sunday's Q&A. Anything that's on your mind, any feedback, we'd love to hear from you, dear listeners. Send it into 2mats@tnepublishing.com. The most important thing you can do this Sunday, subscribe to the New World magazine if you don't already. Do that at thenewworld.co.uk/2mats. That's thenewworld.co.uk/2mats. Thank you as ever to the third Matt Withers.
Thanks, Matt.
For producing the show. And until at latest next Thursday, we'll be back.
Have a great week.
We'll see you there. Have a great week.